Standing on the windswept shores of the Tasman Peninsula, the Port Arthur Historic Site bears silent witness to one of Australia's most confronting chapters. This UNESCO World Heritage listed site, just 90 minutes from Hobart, is more than just a collection of ruins. It's a profound testament to human resilience, colonial brutality, and the complex foundations of modern Australia. Port Arthur was established in 1830 by Lieutenant Governor George Arthur as the major site for punishing transported convicts who had further transgressed. This sprawling settlement was designed to house and reform convicts through harsh conditions, punishment, hard labor, and religious reformation. Originally beginning as a timber station, the settlement's remote location on the Tasman Peninsula made it an ideal natural prison, surrounded by treacherous waters and accessible only by a narrow strip of land patrolled by guards and dogs. The convict transportation system that brought thousands to Australia's shores was Britain's answer to overcrowded prisons and the need to establish colonies in distant lands. Following the American Revolution, Britain lost its primary dumping ground for criminals and turned to the far reaches of the Southern Hemisphere. Port Arthur represented the system's most extreme manifestation, a place where even the convicts were sent. Between 1788 and 1868, over 160,000 convicts were transported to Australia, with Port Arthur serving as the final destination for the most troublesome offenders. Over the course of its operation, 12,500 convicts served time at this remote outpost, making it one of the most significant penal settlements in the British Empire. The UNESCO World Heritage listed Port Arthur Historic Site is the best preserved convict settlement in Australia and is among 11 historic places that together form the Australian Convict Sites World Heritage Property. The Australian convict sites were inscribed on the World Heritage List in 2010. This recognition acknowledges Port Arthur's exceptional universal value in telling the story of forced migration and the colonial expansion of European powers. The site's World Heritage status reflects its outstanding preservation and its ability to represent the broader narrative of convict transportation, a practice that shaped not only Australia but influenced penal systems worldwide. Consisting of 11 sites spread throughout Australia in Tasmania, New South Wales, Western Australia, and on Norfolk Island, the Australian convict sites tell the epic story of Australia's convict heritage. The guard tower was constructed in 1836 on the word of the Commandant Captain Charles O'Hara Booth. It was part of a much larger military complex that dominated the settlement's landscape. This imposing structure served as both a practical watchtower and a psychological tool of control, its elevated position offering commanding views across the settlement and surrounding waters. The tower escaped the ravages of the bushfire due to its lead roof, making it one of the few structures to survive relatively intact. Today, visitors can still sense the weight of surveillance that once pressed down on the convict population from this stone sentinel. This fountain is situated in front of the penitentiary's muster yard and was a part of the daily routine for the convicts, who would drink from it before starting their work. The fountain has been reinstated to its original location within the historic site. Located behind the penitentiary on Champ Street, named after Port Arthur's commandant from 1844-1853, is the police station. This house was not part of the penal colony. During the 19th century, the police headquartered in the Law Courts building, which burned down in 1897. In 1936, this home was built to serve the small community that remained after the penal settlement closed. The police station represents the transition from penal colony to township, a reminder that life continued at Port Arthur long after the last convict chains were removed. It stands as a symbol of how the site evolved from a place of punishment to a community struggling to redefine itself. The penitentiary remains the most recognizable structure at Port Arthur, its imposing sandstone walls speaking of the harsh realities faced by those imprisoned within. The building was used to house the convict population for the next 20 years until the settlement closed in 1877. Originally designed as a flour mill, the four-story structure was converted to accommodation, housing up to 650 prisoners in cramped, Spartan conditions. Several sandstone structures, built by convicts working under hard labor conditions, were cleaned of ivy overgrowth and restored to a condition similar to their appearance in the 19th century. Buildings include the model prison, the guard tower, the church, and the remnants of the main penitentiary. Port Arthur was far more than just a prison. It was a complete society with its own economy, industries, and social structures. Up to 70 convicts were employed at the yard at its height, with the majority engaged in the menial task of cutting and carrying timber. The remaining convicts were the carpenters, blacksmiths, caulkers, coopers, and shipwrights who actually built the vessels. 15 large ships and over 140 smaller vessels were constructed at the settlement. The site also housed the first boys' reformatory in the British Empire at Point Pure, where young offenders received basic education and trade training. This progressive approach to juvenile justice was revolutionary for its time, attempting to break the cycle of crime through education rather than punishment alone. Fire became Port Arthur's greatest enemy after its closure as a penal settlement. Fires gutted the building in the 1890s, destroying the timber floors, joinery, and shingle roof, shattering the glass windows and damaging much of the framework. When Port Arthur closed in 1877, the building was left. It was gutted by fire in 1897, and not long after many of the bricks were repurposed. In 1875, the wooden spire on top of the bell tower was blown down in a heavy gale. Much of the structure was destroyed by fire in 1884. These fires weren't accidents, but deliberate acts by locals who wanted to erase the dark memories associated with the site. Ironically, these attempts to destroy the past only added to Port Arthur's haunting beauty, creating the romantic ruins that draw visitors today. When the penal settlement closed in 1877, the fate of its former inmates varied dramatically. Many convicts had already completed their sentences and remained in Tasmania as free settlers, contributing to the colony's growth. Others had died during their imprisonment, their bodies buried in unmarked graves on the Isle of the Dead. Some former convicts struggled to integrate into free society, carrying the stigma of their past wherever they went. The lucky ones found work in trades they had learned at Port Arthur, while others drifted to other colonies seeking fresh starts. The convict experience had fundamentally changed them, leaving psychological scars that would last lifetimes. After closure, Port Arthur's buildings faced decades of neglect and deliberate destruction. It remained derelict until 1979, when funding was secured to preserve the site as a tourist destination. The transformation from forgotten ruin to heritage site required massive conservation efforts, with archaeologists, historians, and conservators working to stabilize structures and interpret the site's complex history. Today, the ruins stand as powerful reminders of Australia's convict origins. What was once a place of punishment and despair has become a site of education and reflection, drawing visitors from around the world to confront the darker chapters of colonial history. Port Arthur Historic Site offers more than just a glimpse into Australia's past. It provides a profound meditation on justice, punishment, and human dignity. Walking through its ruins, visitors can almost hear the echoes of thousands of voices, each with their own story of crime, punishment, and redemption.